When we slow down and connect with our bodies, and just as importantly, our heart, what happens? Well, research shows what the ancients intuited millennia ago. We feel more whole. Events take on a new, helpful perspective, and we shift how we feel and think about what's important, deepening our motivation and our resolve. Increasingly, we're becoming more aware that our relationship with technology takes us in the opposite direction to a more expedient, short-term place where we often feel thinned out. In this conversation, Mark Crowley shares his transformative journey from a challenging childhood to becoming a successful leader who prioritized emotional well-being and heart-centered leadership. Tune in to an important conversation on the evolving leader.
Mark, welcome to the show. It's absolute pleasure to have you here. And, I really enjoyed coming onto your show and talking about our work. Can you set the scene for, the people listening today about what motivates you in your work? What's, the key milestones in your journey? What are you here to talk about?
It's a very big question. And, I try to be really concise with it, and I never am. What I will say is that it's been a lifelong journey for me, John. It's not I've been studying this and now I've had this epiphany. It's more of I led this way my entire career and have been spending the last 15 years looking for all the evidence that I can possibly find to validate it. And it's almost as if there's been this printing press of research to confirm it. So big picture, my mom died when I was very young and my father raised me. He was a very successful businessman, but I'll just say a horrible human being and a horrible father. And what he did during my childhood was to kind of cripple my self-esteem. He wanted me to believe that I had no potential in life, that I was never going to amount to anything, that I would be an abject failure. And then he kicked me out of the house when I turned 18 years old with no money, no support. And I went to college and, very much a struggle. And to the end of it, though, I'd gotten into a rhythm where I was working, going to school, graduating. And I started talking to the people that are graduating with me. And I said, what are you doing next? And they said, well, I'm going off to Harvard Business School, or I'm going to law school, graduate school. And I'm thinking, no school would want me. I'm still carrying this voice inside of me, even though I've just graduated from the same top 10 public school in America with honors, much more of a struggle than these people had. And they're optimistically going ahead, and I'm thinking, God, thank God I got through this. Like, that's the best that I can do in this world. And I started thinking about, well, what's the difference between these people? And it was obvious, it should be obvious to anybody listening, that the way that I grew up, there were certain things lacking that I believed in that moment that would have made me infinitely more successful and thoughtful direction, someone to care about me, someone to love me, check in, encourage you if you didn't do well on an exam, those kinds of things. So when I started managing people, what I did was I unconsciously gave people everything that I always wanted and didn't get. And every team that I had just flourished and excelled. And they just kept promoting me, which, by the way, was odd because I'm looking at myself going, are you people crazy giving me all this responsibility? But they're looking at me saying, this guy, whatever he's doing, he knows how to lead people. So long story short, I did this for another 15 years until somebody who would worked for me for almost 20 years came to me and said, you realize you manage people very differently, don't you? And I go, well, what do you mean? And she starts pointing it out. And she starts giving me examples of how people around me, my peers, were managing with fear and intimidation and micromanagement. And she goes, here, you're seeing the potential in people and you're developing it. And you're making people safe. People love working for you and they're performing for you. She goes, you realize you're doing something very different. And it was in that moment that I went, oh my God, I'm 43 years old and I'm just now realizing that this is my childhood and all that experience had influenced me to manage this way. So I continued, got 2 senior level positions, national level roles, big jobs, and I ended up leaving and I decided to write a book. And a friend of mine, one day, about 10 months into the process, Sean said, you're going to have to explain why your practices work, right? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, people are going to think you need a shitty childhood in order to lead this way. And I realized how brilliant that was. Like, it was like Buddha coming and saying, you got to do this. And I realized, so I spent about 15 more months looking for research to validate that people were miserable at work and the reasons why. But the big conclusion here is that I reached out to a world-class cardio surgeon and wrote her a letter and said, I have this belief that what I was doing to get people to scale mountains for me, men, women, didn't matter age, didn't matter education, whatever the jobs was, consistently for 25 years, was that I was affecting the hearts in people. And could there be any truth in this? So she invited me. She happened to be not too far from me, graduated top of her class at her medical school, had written 2 books, The Real Deal. And she goes, Mr. Crowley, you figured out something we're just figuring out in medicine. And that is that the heart is much more than a pump, and that the heart is actually influencing our choices and our decisions. And so when you say that you might have been affecting the hearts in people, you most profoundly were. And I had tears coming down my eyes because I realized my whole life experience is being validated. So I wrote my first book, Lead from the Heart. People heard that book title in business and thought, he's nuts. Like, he's either a religious nut or a spiritualist or somebody who doesn't understand business. And so when I realized that I was going to be faced with all this opposition, I started writing for Fast Company magazine to drip on people. And then I started my podcast. And then I wrote a second edition 11 years later, and it's been taught in 11 universities. So we're finally seeing people are understanding that I'm not talking about this romantic heart. I'm not talking about that kind of love. I'm talking about a very different kind of experience. So that's why I'm on this journey. I realized that, like, we need to transform leadership in a way that aligns in a win-win orientation.
Can we, before we move forward, can we get a sense of the degree which you've made peace with your past and your dad and so on? Because what you're describing there is what psychologists would talk about as post-traumatic growth. Instead of getting weaker, you got stronger as a result of the kind of lack of nurture that you had, which not everybody does. I mean, obviously not everybody does. They can carry the hurt and it hold them back for their whole life. Have you made peace with that? And, what do you think it was about you that allowed you to do that?
I don't know that I'll ever answer that question. I have a twin brother, to be honest with you, and the experience that we had, everything that I described to you, we experienced together, and it destroyed him. I haven't seen him in 23 years. So to answer, how did I make it out? How did I not? I had a woman next door to me who my brother had too, but she just saw my potential and told me not to listen to what was going on at home. And I think I really wanted to believe that, but he had that too, and he didn't respond to it. But it's interesting because I had all the success in my career. And then I started to write a book, and putting an outline together, John, was easy. Starting to write it, I thought was going to kill me because it was bringing up my father's voice again, which was, you're not a writer. You don't have anything to say. No one's going to listen to you. Why are you doing this? And it was crippling. And so I, told my wife a few times, I don't know if I can actually pull this off. It's just so overwhelming to me. So she said to me, she goes, I have this friend, and she's a very spiritual person. And she said, like, almost as if like your last shot is to talk to somebody to see if they can help you get through this. So I talked to her, and this is somebody who's, you're asking an important question in my experience, in my journey, because she's not from this planet. Because I never told her I was struggling. I never told her I was writing a book. I never told her what the book was about. She just starts telling me. She goes, I need to ask you a question right now. Have you forgiven your father? And I go, yeah, I've forgiven my father. She goes, no, I mean, how have you forgiven your father? She goes, because you're not going to be able to write this book until you do. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And she said, you need to go out in, the woods somewhere and tell him all the things that he did to you and experience that again, and then forgive him. And I go, I don't know that I want to do that. So she goes, well, I'm going to make it even more challenging for you. She says, I want you to tell your story in your book. So this is my first book, Lead from the Heart. She goes, I want you to tell it because you will forgive him by the time it's over, because you will re-experience it all. And I go, there's no effing way I'm going to do that. I do not want that pain again. Like, this was too much. And she goes, you called me. And I knew she was right. So I went to the university where I went to undergraduate, and I was an English literature major in the eighth, like it looks like your office. I'm up on the eighth floor, this beautiful view, and I'd spent hundreds and hundreds of days there reading and researching and writing papers. And I find this office that I've never seen before. And I go, wow, this is fantastic. I go in with a legal pad and a pen, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to start to go through the whole sequence of events. And I thought it was going to kill me. I seriously thought it was going to kill me. But the book starts off, the whole preface of the book is how I got to lead the way I'm leading and telling the whole story. And by the time I got done, I had forgiven my father. With one exception, there's a little legacy here. So I have a twin brother, but I also have 5 older brothers and sisters, and I've seen 3 of them die in the last 18 months, all from cirrhosis of the liver. The pain that they experienced, 15, 20 years before I did was very similar, and they just drank themselves to heal it. And so when I think about not having my siblings around because of that, there is this little bit of, thanks, Dad. But for the most part, I think I've moved on from it. It's a really phenomenal question. So thank you for asking it.
Well, I mean, it's an incredibly painful thing to keep on reliving, and thank you for having the courage and fortitude to do that. But I think you're not alone in this. Many people experience so much.
I mean, you're so insightful, John. I mean, we've had a conversation before, and I knew that then. But like, just the questions you're asking, I'm like, 90% of the people I talk to wouldn't even think to say what you just said. So, and one of the things is, her name was Lisa Renee. And when I spoke to her, she said, you're not just doing this for you. She goes, do you realize how many people have had similar experiences and need to heal it and need to see that you can actually overcome it? So I didn't know. I had no experience with it. And so I wrote the book. People started reading the book. I started to go speaking. Men especially would come up to me afterwards and go, hey, could you come over here for a second? I want to talk to you for a second. And then they go, I had the same thing you did. And I'm happy to see that you overcame it, because you could just see it in their eyes that they hadn't really confronted it. So like, she was onto something. Like, I'm helping people by having them read this. It wasn't just me having this catharsis.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we were having this conversation 10, 15, 20 years ago, there would be a majority of people listening to it would be switched off by now, because this is not business relevant. This is, deeply uncomfortable. This is something that, a man doesn't do. You don't go back.
Right. Yeah. Right.
You don't uncover these things. You stuff it down and you deal with it. And, and you process it by drinking or, taking it out on other people. You become a bully, or, you get power to wield over other people to demonstrate that you're worth it, and so on. And as the economy has become more and more sophisticated, and we spend more of our time at work, and trying to find meaning in work, this conversation now becomes more normal. And it was really interesting. I was reading a piece the other day, Manoush Shafik, who's the former president of Columbia University and a director at the London Business School. And in the past, she said, jobs were about muscles. Now they're about brains, but in the future they'll be about the heart.
Heart.
And I thought, there was a beautiful kind of, segue into our conversation, which is, your time is here. There's a convergence between the way the world is evolving, particularly driven by AI, a understanding about what human value looks like at work. And then more people not willing to put up with just bringing a partial dimension of themselves to the equation. So can we just quickly, because I'd like to talk about your new work as well, but can we talk a little bit about, Lead from the Heart, and, what did you cover in that work?
It's really interesting. I forget her name, but there's a famous television actress in America. Holland Taylor is her name. And she was on some TV show about 8 or 9 years ago and won an Emmy. And I think at this point in her life, she was probably like in her late 50s, maybe early 60s. And she's a star, like it all happened. And she said, I'm an overnight success that took me 20 years. And that's kind of when you're saying this is my moment. I thought it was going to be my moment when I introduced the science that showed that, human beings are actually influenced by two forms of intelligence. It's not just our brains, but that our hearts and our bodies are influencing us constantly. And I thought that, CEOs especially would say, hey, we now have a better understanding of human nature, so we should align our business practices and our leadership practices to this. And what a naive thought that was, because they want people clawing their way up the ladder and stamping on the foot of the guy below them. And, they want all that competition and fear so, it's a bottom up thing that's happening now. I think it is more of what's happening here. That sophistication is that companies are looking and they're saying, we cannot continue to manage this way because people won't put up with it for a long, long time. Like my generation, our generation is basically people like, okay, I guess I have to suck it up and take this crappy boss of mine. And people are like, I'm not doing that anymore. That's a big difference. But to answer your question, the big picture of the book is that not just that there's something called the vagus nerve, and the science that I ended up learning about through what's called the Institute of Heart Math 15 years ago was introduced to me by Dr. Mimi Ganeri, who's a heart surgeon, cardiosurgeon, that she was like, you're so onto this. I'm going to introduce you to the people who are informing me. And they were very willing to help me. And what they said was that the heart is not just a pump. We've always believed that's all it did, but that it's a feeling sensing organ. It actually has its own mini brain. It's formed in the embryo before the brain. So it's almost as if nature said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. No, we're going to put the heart in charge of developing this human being. But the big issue is that you have communication going on 24/7 with the heart and the mind, and the heart actually sends more communication to the brain than the other way around. But there's a component of this that's really fascinating, which is that, and I've pulled these pieces together over the years, and they're all really fascinating, but they connect. And Barbara Fredrickson, who's, one of the stars of the positive psychology movement, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, she proved that human beings are hardwired to thrive on positive emotions. Like we need them in order to thrive. And there's a guy in the University of Washington, John Gottman, who's proved that all relationships require a 4-to-1 ratio of positive to negative emotions in order for people to thrive in them. So people, partnerships, people that are married to each other, he can detect almost immediately whether or not the relationship is going to endure because they can see the exchange, what's going on, right? I'm saying, so if that's the case, then we should be paying people an emotional currency. We shouldn't be thinking that money is the solution to all problems. We should be giving people the experience of positive emotions. But 6 months after the book came out, I ended up meeting Roland McCready, who's the head of researcher, head chief scientist at the Institute of Heart Math. And he goes, tell me about what you did. Like, what did you do as a leader? So I told him all the things that we just talked about. And he goes, whether you are aware of it or not, you couldn't have done anything better for people in terms of setting them up for optimal performance. He said, when you were caring about them, making them feel safe, giving them encouragement, giving them growth opportunities, coaching them, appreciating them, all that was this drip, 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 drip of positive emotions. He said, you set people up for optimal performance, but there's a biological reason for it. There's this communication that's going on between the heart and the mind. He said when people are thriving because they're exceeding that ratio of 4 or 5-to-1 positive emotions to negative emotions, he said that is called coherence. And where we are in coherence, we can perform optimally. So I'm saying, okay, if that's the case, then we should be creating, and long before this new book, I'm saying we should be creating environments where people experience well-being because that's how they perform best. There's one other component of this that is that we're not rational. we think, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, and we've always believed it, and we've always gone out and hired the brainiest people in management. And why is it that only 30% of people are engaged? Because the people that we tend to bring in are really smart, and they're good with math and data, and they're not good with people, and they don't understand what it is that draws out the greatness in people. So it's really feelings and emotions that are driving our decisions under the hood. And I say this a lot, and people will go, well, I just want you to know, Mark, that I'm the exception. I'm a real data guy, and I'm a real analyst. And what the science shows is that it's going on under the hood, whether you know it or not. Feelings and emotions are driving your decisions and the choices that you make. And we rationalize those decisions, trying to use our minds to say, well, this data shows this, but we've already made the minds and our hearts and our bodies. And so you think about that, it really challenges us to kind of clean the whiteboard and go, if all of this is true, then the way we've traditionally managed people are just so misaligned that we might want to do it a little bit differently.
Who's inspired you as a great leader that does this?
It's an interesting question, because there are people that do it and then they don't do it. Doug Conant, he was the CEO of Nabisco. He lived in Philadelphia, and his office is in Newark, New Jersey, which, if you've never been to Newark, New Jersey, is like a kind of a really awful place. But he had a driver. He was the CEO, and he had a driver, and I think it's like a 2-hour drive. So every day he would use the 2 hours that he had in the car to write personal thank you notes to all of the employees who, managers bubbled up and said, Jean Gomes was exceptional, and just could you please send them a note? And he would hand write a note. Jean, you're exceptional. Thank you so much for what you did specifically. And the performance of the company was like magnified. It was like overnight, people are like, somebody actually cares about me here. And it was something so simple. It was just an experience of love. It was like, you matter here. I'm the CEO. I'm sitting in my car. I could be reading my newspaper. I could be sleeping. I could be listening to the radio. I could be doing a million things, but I'm taking the time to write them. And I think that's sort of like the first time where I said, okay, there's somebody out there that's actually thinking this way.
Yeah. So, when you, wrote the current book, what were you trying to solve for? What was the kind of big idea that led you to work on this?
So it's interesting. So remember, you were saying, a few years ago, people listening to this would be turning off. This is another one of these moments where I think we're at risk of that. So I am not kidding. When COVID hit and the gyms closed, I didn't have anywhere to go in the morning, and it was important part of my ritual to go to the gym. And so I lived near the ocean. So I just instinctively got up the next morning at 4:30, got on the beach at 5:00 and walked for an hour. And I immediately was like, oh my God, why haven't I been doing this? Instead of the bright lights and the music at 5:00 in the morning, I've got all this peace and tranquility and time to think. And I'm still, getting in a little cardio workout. So I've been doing that ever since. And one day I was coming off the beach, and this word primer came to mind. And I was like, it's a piece of intuition, like something's going on there, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. So I have this friend of mine who's sort of been my coach for a long time. And I go, hey, this word primer came into my mind. It's not a word I ever use. So I'm trying to figure out what it is. And she goes, that's an inspiration to write another book. And that's what you have to take it and do it. And I was like, I don't know that I want to do this. So I read Rick Rubin's book on creativity. And he says in this, he said, the difference between creative and non-creative people isn't that the other people aren't creative. It's that the creative people understand that there's all this information circulating in the ether, and when it comes to them, they do something with it. He said, because if they don't do something with it, it goes to someone else. Not because the universe is punitive, but because the time for the information is now. And so I'm reading it and I'm like, I'll do it. Like, don't take it away from me. Like, I'm not kidding. So then, I had just written this article in Fast Company where I'll put it this way. 12 years ago, I'd worked with Gallup. I just reached out to them on a whim and I just said, hey, do you guys have any new information that, shows that the workplaces are getting any worse? And I ended up talking to Jim Harder, who's the head of their research and started their engagement and well-being study. And he goes, so in the conversation, I think he just felt good talking to me. And he said, well, we have this new report and it's called the American Workplace Study. And, I'm happy to let you publish it in your article. So I literally am the one who published an article saying that only 30% of Americans are engaged at work. And this was in 2013. So I get this update from Gallup a year ago, and I'm like, wait a minute, these numbers are the same. They're the same as they were 13 years ago. And it was like this big fire drill, and everybody's talking about how important engagement is, and we never took it seriously. So I wrote an article saying this is like mythology, that we should not be investing another dollar in engagement because no one's really taking it seriously. And so the premise of the book is that Wall Street never took it seriously. CEOs never took it seriously. And so it's always been this sort of ceremonial once a year, twice a year survey that no one's ever been held accountable for. And that we tell people it's important, but we really don't mean it. And we're not changing our leadership practices. So then I read a study that happened where you are and at the University of Oxford. And it demonstrated that there's a direct correlation between employee well-being and productivity, how people perform. And the cornerstone of the research was that it all boils down to feelings. And I'm like, okay, this is massive confirmation for something I wrote about 11 years ago. And so I started digging into it. And it was just this very clear thing for me, which was stop talking about engagement. It's too complicated. You can't hold people accountable. And let's focus on well-being. If we know that sets people up to perform their best, then let's teach managers how to do it and why they should do it. And so that's really what the book is about. It's a primer that teaches managers how to specifically elevate employee well-being while concurrently driving for performance.
So what's the first move that the leader, the manager needs to make?
This is a surprise. To me, it was a surprise. So in the research, if we could just, if you and I and 10 other people were in a room and we said, what do you think is the drivers of well-being? You'd probably see money and, health and a million other things. But the number one driver of well-being is belonging. And that was a bit of a surprise to me. And it's a surprise to everybody based on the data. They asked a whole bunch of leaders, where would you rank all these different things? And most people didn't even have it on their horizon. It was never even an idea. And then when they told them, well, it's part of this, it's one of them, where would you rank it? They ranked it, almost dead last. But it's interesting. So listen to this. These are statistics that just came out this week. The average American spends 24% less time socializing and communicating with other people than 10 years ago. 24%. KPMG, most people, 81% today, would trade 20% in salary in exchange to work with close friends. 81%. And 45% feel lonely at work every day. So I didn't have those statistics, by the way. I had something similar, but I'm looking at this. I'm like, this is huge confirmation that what we've done through, a year of solitude after COVID, during COVID, that we never adjusted, and that our reliance on texting people and, using social media as a form of communicating and connecting isn't working. It's undermining us. And so, by the way, connection is all about the heart, right? So if we're not connecting, we're not having well-being. If we don't have well-being, we can't perform at our best. And so that's why you've got 45% lonely, and you've got people desperate for friendships, and you've got people that are really unhappy. So you look at that and you say, well, how do we fix that? And so one of the chapters in The Power of Employee Well-Being is saying, guess what? With all the different things you've got on your plate, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, you're going to have to take this on. And the way you take this on is to create a culture where people don't compete with one another on their teams, that you're not judging them in respect to one another, that you're creating a cohesive team, and you're saying to people, if you want to work for me and you want to be a part of this team, you have to have each other's backs. Like, we are here to help one another. We're going to share ideas. We're going to share best practices. If you do something exceptional, John, you're going to get celebrated for it. And then you're going to tell everybody what you did. So we're going to lift all boats that way, but also giving people social connection by literally just not saying, hey, we're going out for drinks after night, which 40% of the people can't go to because they have kids to pick up from school, or, they're going to night school or whatever. You do it in the daytime. You say, hey, grab a cup of coffee and let's all get together and, let's just have some conversations and just give people that time. And managers are like, well, we don't have time to do that. We need to produce, we have to get this work done. And I'm like, okay, that may be true, but this is such an essential part of how you're going to get that work done that you might be wise to invest the time to do it.
So you talk in your work about the importance of self-awareness in this, because many people are cut off from the feelings that they have about feelings of loneliness or resentment, or all of these kind of things that are actually governing how they relate to their work, to their colleagues, and so on, and particularly leaders who are sort of numb to those feelings. So what have you got in terms of thoughts around building that understanding and reconnecting with, how you're really feeling?
Well, it's interesting because people are surprised. The book isn't out, comes out in like 15 days. But the people that have read it are surprised that my first chapter. So in other words, the book sets it up saying that engagement needs to go away, and here's why well-being is much more important. But once that happens, then it's okay. So now we've established that well-being is more important. How do we actually do it? And the first chapter is called Know Thyself. And so this goes into what you're asking me, which is, why would you put that there first? And I find that, and it is true with men a lot of times, that, we've created this culture where we go, feelings don't matter. Don't get caught up in your feelings. Don't let anybody else have feelings either. So, leave your troubles at the door is sort of our belief system for a really long time. And we don't understand that we're emotional beings. We're not rational beings. So they're happening anyway. So you might want to entertain them and allow them and understand them and see what they're influencing you. It's data. Emotions are data, right? So I think what I'm saying in the Know Thyself component is, you might be smart like me. I mean, we've already established how I got where I got to, right? And it had to do with some serious introspection, even healing of some very painful experiences. My mom dying at 9 years old. I came home from school one day and they just said, your mom died. And I'm like, why didn't anybody prepare me for this? Like, nobody told me. I knew she was sick, but I mean, it's still this devastating experience. But you got to believe that will influence you in your life if you don't address it and say, how is that impacting me in terms of how I interact with people? I'll give you a better example. So my father was, you know what his influence was. So basically the driving force for me for many, many years in my life was to prove to him that I wasn't the abject failure that he said he was. But the interesting thing was he kicked me out of the house at 18 and I never saw him. Basically he wasn't in my life, and then he died 18 years later. The most experiences that I saw of him were in the hospital when he was dying. So I'm out there working every day trying to kill myself, trying to perform and try to achieve for a ghost. But guess what? I'm also setting up an example where, people knew, like, that guy, does he work all the time? Like, he's here before anybody, he leaves after everybody. And so it got me where I wanted to, and I learned so much. And, so there were benefits of that. But I'm also undermining the well-being of people because I'm setting a ridiculous standard of what work should look like. And so I think I was like 50 years old when I went, I don't need to prove to him anything. But it took me that long. So if you can know thyself, if you can go back and say, what are the influences? What was my father demanding? Was he approving? Was he, did he set high standards? What about my mom? What about my siblings? Did I have any tragic experiences? Did my parents go through a divorce? Did we lose, certain financial situations? Because we carry them with us. I mean, one of the most best-selling books right now is called The Body Keeps Score. This is right. And so what that means is that all that trauma is still in our bodies until we take a look at it and heal it. And it's not always that you have to heal it. It's just that you have to understand it. So in my situation, understanding it meant I'm trying to prove unconsciously that I'm worthy and have value. And I was doing it by working. And that's what my mind told me I needed to do. If I was 30 years old and somebody said, know thyself and start thinking about what motivates your behavior, I might have had 20 years of perform because it's important to you, Mark, not because you're trying to prove to a ghost.
Welcome back to the Evolving Leader podcast. As always, if you enjoy what you hear, then please share the podcast across your network and also leave us a rating and a review. Now let's get back to the conversation.
So you talk about replacing the engagement surveys with a more kind of regular pulse check of the organization. Can you talk us through that?
Yes. If you don't mind, I'll mention, I have an article coming out, it's tomorrow. So I'm telegraphing to our audience when we recorded this. It's coming out on the 13th of September. And I interviewed two of the PhD data guys who create the pulse surveys for two of the biggest companies in the space, Workday and Culture Amp, and basically just tried to get a sense of how effective have they been for you because they're sort of on the cutting edge. But the big picture, Jean, is I'm saying you do an annual survey or a semi-annual survey engagement. By the time you get the data out, it takes another month, and then you give it to people and managers are looking at it. And let's say you work for me and I can see, I'm not supposed to look to see if it's John Gomes doing this, but I can kind of figure it out because he can say, I had this situation with Mark and he didn't handle it very well. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, but that was 5 months ago. I'm not going to take that seriously. That's water under the bridge, right? So we can't really do much with that data, and then on top of it, so you're not happy because you're like, why did I fill this thing out? Mark's no better of a manager than he was when I filled it out. We just keep doing this every year. But I think that, the thing that really just one day I was like, oh my God, like the whole premise of this twice a year surveys, you can't do anything with them. You can't recalibrate. And so if I say to you, if I go out with a survey and I just say, Jean, at the end of this work week, how would you grade your well-being? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or bright green, orange, red, and you look at those scores, you can say, well, wait a minute, we've got a workforce that's not very happy right now. Their well-being seems to be low. You can deal with that then. But not only that, the part that I love the most is that information gets distributed immediately. It's like, the technology, you fill it out and the next morning it's sitting on everybody's desk. So managers can look at this and they can say, well, Mark, you're hitting all your goals. So congratulations. But your people hate working for you. Like the feedback that we're getting on you on a consistent basis with one question of, does your manager coach you often? Do you feel you have growth opportunities working for Mark? Do you feel like you're appreciated? Like the scheme of things, Mark, is demonstrating that you're not doing a very good job of caring about people's well-being. So you're on warning now that if you don't improve this, so what do we need to do to help you become a better leader? Because now I can hold Mark accountable for being a better manager. And what I love about that is that we never could do that with engagement. We never held anybody accountable. People could get away with it like murder. But now we're forcing managers to improve. And if we're sharing the results peer to peer and they can see they're not doing well in relationship to everyone else, they're going to fix themselves. And so now all of a sudden, the opportunity for every employee to work for a really good manager just has completely escalated. It's just completely magnified.
So and there's there's a lot of evidence around the fact that when people have a sense of autonomy and control over their lives, their well-being takes a great leap forward. What have you found out about that aspect, about, in a world that's becoming even more uncertain and fast changing, where people don't necessarily feel in control of their lives? How can leaders and organizations try to make people feel like they have more autonomy?
So you can see that this is another example of how I've been influenced by your part of the world. There's this magnificent study that was done at Whitehall, which is the government offices in London for people that aren't familiar. And the common denominator of Whitehall is that they're all government workers and they all have sort of a level of pay and responsibility. And so if I were to ask most people, so if you think about any organization, the CEO down to the people that sit in the welcoming you to the building, somebody with no responsibility whatsoever, as opposed to somebody who's got massive responsibility, that if you would say, where is the most stressful experience? Who's having the most stress? Most people would say, well, the CEO is clearly got the most responsibility, so he or she has got the most stress. And what Sir Michael Marmot found, they knighted him for this, is he found that it's actually the opposite, that the people at the bottom of the rung are the ones who have the premature death, strokes, heart attacks much more regularly than anybody else, particularly people at the top. And the bottom line conclusion was, we're not giving those people control. So you and I, today, what time do I get up? I get up when I want to, or unless I've got an appointment. But when I want to take a break, I take a break. When I want to go to lunch, I go to lunch. When I want to end my day, I end my day. I have much more flexibility, whereas we impose lots of disciplines on people. You need to be by 8:00. Your break is 20 minutes. Be back on time. We tell people specifically what to do in their jobs without a lot of autonomy, and that kills our spirit is really the conclusion. So what we need to do is to learn to trust people. We need to learn to tell people specifically what their jobs are and what the expectations are. We need to teach them how to do them so that they know how to do it. They're competent. We need to make sure that we have metrics so people can look at themselves and say, am I doing well or am I not doing well? And by trusting people to do that and holding them accountable, you're giving people freedom, and that creates massive well-being.
And one of the reasons why organizations tend to default into over control is when things become more uncertain and there's lots of change. And you talk about normalizing ambiguity to kind of offset that tendency. Talk to us about that.
I think I don't know about you, but like the world we're living today is, every day you get up and you're like, we're just becoming inured to it. Like, it's just like, is it this craziness that we're living in? I guess this is the world we're living in. But our tendency as human beings is to want to control it. And so I think when things are most uncertain, we want to lock things down. And I think what I found is, from a leadership standpoint, is that we are far better off by sort of, this is the third time we're going to lose some of the people listening, is you have to kind of have like a Zen attitude about this, which is like, no matter how much we plan, we have this illusion that we can control every outcome, and we can't. And no matter how well we plan. So you've met those people that think this plan is rock solid and this is the way it's going to roll out because I'm telling you so. And then nothing goes that way. And they're like, well, I don't know what happened. I gave you a great plan. You people didn't execute it right or something. And it's like, no, we cannot plan. We need to consider what the options are, but we also need to be receptive to the fact that life is going to interfere. And what happens more than often than not is that when life interferes and something doesn't go well, we want to curse the gods. We want to go, why are you doing this to me? And instead, if we put ourselves in a position of, I did my best to plan this, we had the best people planning this, it didn't go the way we want to, what do we do now? Like, you just accept that life is going to give you a bad hand as opposed to getting pissed off about it. And when we get pissed off about it, We want to go back and defend the plan. We want to go, well, that plan was really good. And, I don't think we should deviate from the plan because we think that's how we get back where we need to. And where we really get back to where we need to is to say, based on what we know now, what do we do? That's a very big difference. And I think, if leaders understood that and they just have this attitude of, I'm not happy that this didn't go the way I wanted to. I thought we had the right plan, but we're not going to shoot anybody. We're all just going to get together and figure out how do we go forward. I mean, Matt, just feel that into that, right? It's like, okay, that sounds cool to me. Like I can go with that. So let's do that. And people get energized as opposed to who the hell put this plan together or who executed this? We need to talk to you, So now all of a sudden you're just making it worse. And this is how we do it. I've been in the world too long to know that, you make a bad plan or it doesn't go the way. And it's like, well, who do we kill? Who do we fire? Bring him in here. And it's like, that's not sort of acknowledging what the real world is like. As long as people are doing their jobs and you think they're putting their best work into it, then bring those people back into the discussion and say, okay, this didn't go the way we wanted. Let's figure out where we're going to go. And it's interesting because I've found that when you get these situations, I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of setbacks. And you get the setback and then all of a sudden 3 months later, something happens and you're like, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had the setback. So like all of a sudden now I'm really grateful, like didn't go the way I wanted to because there's a better outcome. That's also the way the world works. So I think you kind of have to just sort of accept all of that.
So every time I ask you a question, we're going to lose another chunk of our audience potentially.
I think we're down to one. Just like this. It's like you and I now.
It suggests as a new title for your book, the 7 lies you're telling yourself that you don't want to hear, right. The 7 inconvenient truths. But there is the book towards the end of the book, you talk about, this idea that, like our core need from people that we follow is to feel valued by them, to feel cared by them. And that is so counterintuitive to many leaders who don't care for themselves. They don't take care of themselves, enough. Their sacrifice mindset means that, it's the last thing they feel they can do is to look after the needs of other people because that is somehow, infantilizing them or something. There's some story that's in their head around this. Talk to us about why we should really shift that mindset, why we should shift our thinking on that.
Well, I mean, the first answer is this is what people want. It used to be that people went to work for a paycheck because they had to meet their basic needs. And now most of us can meet our basic needs. And so we ascend up Maslow's pyramid and we start looking for growth and opportunity and self-expression and belonging and all these components of leading up to self-actualization. So when we go to work every day, it's like, I'm not going to work just for a paycheck. Like I want to know that I'm working for somebody that knows who I am outside of this place and cares about who I am outside of this place, not just you're here to get that job done and I don't really care about the rest of you. This becomes very important. So if you're managing people and you are I don't really care enough about myself to take care of myself, but I'm really not going to take care of you, you're not going to keep people very long. And I think that's part of what people are seeing. But I'll tie this up in a bow, which I think is really fascinating. So I interviewed Barbara Fredrickson, and she, in this conversation, told me about how we human beings are hardwired to thrive on positive emotions. And that was just like mind blowing to me. It was just one of those moments where I was like, this is such complete confirmation of my whole life experience, but to have it empirically proved. And I got greedy with her. Don't ask me why, but I was like, I just sort of said, thank you for what you just did for me. Instead, I said, you got anything else up your sleeve? Like something else you haven't told me that like is going to blow my mind? And she goes, well, yeah, I do actually. And I go, well, go on. So she says, when you think about positive emotions, it's like interest, attention, love, joy, awe. She said, what we have figured, and by we, she meant her, what we have figured out is that any experience of positive emotions is an experience of love. Awe is love. Appreciation is love. Attention is love. Interest is love. That is the reason you want to care about your people, because that's what we're all here for. That's what we all need. That's what optimizes human beings, is love. Now, that doesn't mean you go up and go, John, I love you, I love you, I love you, man, or I got to hug you, man. That's so reductionist and stupid. That's not what we're talking about. Just show people. Demonstrate that you're interested in them. Find out who they are. Find out what they're there for. What do you want to do? You want to be my job? You want to be CEO? You want to stay with what you're doing? What would you like to learn? How do you like to be appreciated? I had an assistant for 15 years who edited my book. We were tight as thieves. And I had all my managers together, like 35 people in a room one day. And she was exceptional. She was just exceptional. So I said, hey, everyone, could you do me a favor? Give Susan a round of applause. She's just like, she helps all of us. It's not just me. Place went crazy. Applaud, applaud, applaud. So meeting's over. I go back in my office. I'm working. She comes in and she goes, don't you ever do that to me again. And I'm like, what? And she goes, I don't want that kind of appreciation. I want to hear it from you, but I don't want that. I'm an introvert. And I'm like, oh my God. So here I'm thinking I'm doing great because it would have been work for me. I would have loved to have had that recognition in front of 1 million people, not her. So, right? So it's understanding what people want and need and giving it to them that is the reason why you want to care about them. It's the cornerstone of everything that I've learned as a leader. It is the most important piece of information. If you care about your people, they will reciprocate. We are naturally wired to reciprocate and perform in ways you probably will never imagine until you do this.
And that is a brilliant place to leave our conversation. I wish we had more time to talk, but Mark, I really wish you the greatest of luck with the new book.
Thank you.
Your work, it's really important. It's much needed in the world. And, wishing you continued success and satisfaction in what you're doing. And thank you again for joining us on The Evolving Leader.